Hi, my name's Al and today I'm going to show you how to service the headset on your bike. That's the bearings which allow you to steer. It's dead easy to service your headset, doesn't take very long at all and it hardly requires any tools. It is preventative maintenance, so better to do it before your headset feels rough. We'd recommend doing it about every 6 months. To make the process as easy as possible, we're going to remove the front wheel, undo the front brake caliper, make sure you don't lose any bolts, and also undo any hose guides, any computer cables, anything like that that might hinder the removal of the fork. Okay, so with the wheel gone and the brake detached, the fork's now free, so we can go ahead and undo the stem clamp bolts. Do them bit by bit. Don't undo one all the way because you put a lot of strain on the other bolt. Once they're loose, we can undo the preload bolt here. It's important that we support the fork at this stage because there is a chance that it might drop out of the frame. So remove the top cap and the preload bolt. Any spaces that you might have either above or below the stem, and then the fork in this case has just dropped out. In some cases you might need to give the steerer tube a sharp tap just to free the wedge which holds the fork in place, or if it's really stuck then you can use a soft face mallet, but yeah, generally the fork should come out pretty easily. Okay, so now we can access the individual parts of the headset. So we have a top cover, a split wedge, the top bearing which sits either in the headset cup or in this case directly into the frame because it's an integrated headset, and at the bottom we have the lower bearing. Now that we've got it all apart, it's time to give it all a good clean. So we can clean up the fork, clean up inside the head tube on the frame, and we're going to clean all the individual parts of the headset apart from the bearings, which we're going to sort out in a sec. With all the parts nice and clean, we can set about servicing the bearings. So here we have 2 sealed bearings. Some headsets won't have sealed bearings, they'll just have loose balls which are snapped into a cage. Just clean those as much as you can, and then when you reassemble the headset you can grease those bearings in the frame. With a sealed bearing though, we need to take it apart. So if you get a Stanley knife or similar, you should be able to pick a seal off the bearing itself. Seals on both sides, so it's better if you pick the seals off both sides because then you can flush the old grease and dirt out of the bearing. Pop the bearing onto some tissue, get yourself some degreaser and just blast the bearing through. This one isn't particularly dirty, to be honest. Once you've cleaned the bearing, you need to make sure that it's completely dry before you re-lubricate it. Whilst you wait for the bearing to dry, make sure the seals are are nice and clean. Make sure you keep them orientated correctly so you know which one is the top one and which is the bottom one, because sometimes they'll be different. If the bearing feels rough in any way, you're going to have to replace it. When you're happy that the bearing is totally clean, then we can pack it full of fresh grease. A grease gun makes this much easier. If you rotate the bearing, that will help the grease to penetrate inside of it. Grease the other side as well. Make sure you use plenty, and then just push the seals back into place. Bit of a wipe, and there's your freshly serviced bearing ready to go back into the frame. So now it's just a case of reassembling everything. As long as everything goes on in the right order and the right way around, you can't really go wrong. Put the lower bearing onto the fork. Make sure your cables are orientated correctly. Fit the fork into the head tube, the upper bearing, split wedge, bearing cover, and then either spacers or your stem. Grab your top cap and tighten the preload bolt. This will stop everything from falling out onto the floor. Okay, so now we can nip the preload bolt up. This bolt here is only to preload the bearings. It doesn't hold your fork in your bike, it doesn't hold the stem onto the fork. It's literally to compress the bearings to prevent there being any play in the steering. So we just need to nip that up with a finger and thumb, just so we've got nice smooth steering without any slop at all. We can make some finer adjustments in a minute, but let's nip these stem bolts up. It's important that these are done up properly before you ride your bike, because these stem bolts are what holds your stem onto your fork. Now you're free to refit your brake and fit your wheel, and then we'll just do some fine tuning with the stem and the headset before it's ready to ride. So with the wheel and the brake attached, we're ready to make any final adjustments. Remember that the preload bolt will only take effect if the stem bolts are loose, so make sure you slacken those off if you do need to take any play out the steering. If you need to align the bars, then remember again, you do need to slacken the stem bolts to do that. Once everything's nice and straight and you've got rid of any play in the headset, and the steering's nice and smooth with no slop, then you should fully tighten your stem bolts, and it makes sense to do that with a torque wrench. And that's it. So that's your steering sorted, bike's ready to hit the trails. See you next time, thanks for watching.